Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with DT Sparkles.
Hello.
And poor sensitivity readers. They've been getting a bum rap lately.
Yeah.
Because of all the censorship going on in publishing. And now there's an article out there on The Guardian trying to do some damage control.
For those poor sensitivity readers.
For those poor sensitivity readers. And look, to be fair, it's not the sensitivity readers' fault that these companies are relying heavily on them to edit and censor books.
But I mean, they're not saying no.
They're not saying no. They're not saying, hey, maybe this is a little too far, a little too much, maybe a little too ridiculous. No, actually, it's in their best interest to keep finding things that are problematic because it guarantees them a job, right? So, I mean, that's the thing. Anytime somebody's job depends on finding fault, finding things that are problematic, they're going to keep looking for things that are problematic.
Right. Sometimes things like, changing it to, Augustus Gloop to enormous. Because I guess it was enormously fat. Now it's just enormous.
No,
that's no, I mean.
It's the same thing.
That would have been a lot more respectful, I think.
So we're going to talk about it because this discussion's coming up mostly over Roald Dahl and, of course, Goosebumps, which we're still not sure, I don't think, what's going on with Goosebumps. Apparently, the UK version is being censored without R.L. Stein's knowledge, but he didn't censor anything, and the US version is staying the same. And mostly this is in the UK. A lot of the censorship is in the UK. But I'm going to actually segue into Dungeons and Dragons because Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast has hired sensitivity readers, and that's when everything went off the rails with the ridiculous, orcs are racist, and we have to make sure everything's inclusive, and we can't have anything offensive in D&D, and we have to disown all the old stuff that we did because it's problematic.
Yeah, anybody who doesn't agree is istophobic, whatever, so we have to kick them out.
Right. So let's talk about sensitivity readers. Let's be sensitive. Before we get into any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 298, almost 300,000 in subs. Thank you so much for the support. We talk about pop culture. We talk about publishing. We have covered a whole bunch of stories related to sensitivity readers because it's a pretty recent thing. They're trying to say that sensitivity readers have been around for a while. Now, they have had some editorial oversight. They've had people kind of go through things before and look and say, hey, this might not be such a good idea. And in the case of Roald Dahl, to be fair, they actually did make changes to his work back in the 60s. The Oompa Loompas were changed.
But he agreed to that, though.
He did agree to that, yeah. And this is, after his death, they're going through and they're just nitpicking every damn thing in his books. And again, I think you can trace back a lot of the decline in Dungeons & Dragons to sensitivity readers being brought on board to create issues where there were no issues.
Yes, no one was looking at orcs and thinking, those are black people.
No, not until the sensitivity readers came along. And same with the Hadozi, the monkeys. It was like, what the frick? All right, so let's talk about this first. This is coming from The Guardian. Sensitivity readers, what publishing's most polarizing role is really about, guys. Sensitivity readers are people too.
It's not always their fault. I get that. But they're hired to basically find fault.
Yes. And when you hire somebody to find fault, they're going to find fault because if they went through and they said, yeah, you know what, there's not much here that's really offensive, then you're going to be like, why did I pay you? And why is anybody paying you? And you're out of a job.
Right.
So again, it's in their best interest to make sure everything's as problematic as possible. But the thing that's really interesting about this article is they flat out admit that the reason this is done is to shut social media up.
Yes.
They're so terrified of social media outrage. And I am going to talk about that later. I think I'm going to do a blog post on that. But statistically, very few of your customers are actually on social media.
And by social media, we mostly mean Twitter. Mostly
Twitter. But they're basically hiring these sensitivity readers who many of them are mired in Twitter culture, cancel culture, all that shit. Because this, Twitter especially is ground zero for publishers, publisher adjacent people, journalists, writers, all those, creative types. They all kind of mingle on Twitter. And this is basically about making sure your peers aren't offended and making these companies dance, so your peers aren't offended, making sure you keep a job. And I've seen some sensitivity readers go off on Twitter like, you don't understand how hard it is. You just don't understand. It's like, nah, it's shunned by some authors, championed by others. Those who work in the book publishing industry as sensitivity readers have become the subject of hot debate. They're hired by publishers, usually on a case-by-case basis, to read a book, generally before it's published, and make editorial suggestions regarding content that could be considered offensive, inaccurate, or stereotypical.
Which I find the stereotypical part extra funny because they keep trying to do this like with Hollywood, but they end up making it more stereotyped.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like you can't be, a Snake Eyes has to be an Asian guy because white people wouldn't do, martial arts, which was the point of why he did what he did. Sorry,
Yeah, that was a huge part
Frost
of this.
as an Eskimo now because for ice powers, it's culturally insensitive not to make it an Eskimo.
Now they're saying that they are hired on a case-by-case basis, depending on, sometimes the author will actually bring them in, especially if, now I do agree with this to some extent. If you're writing about a culture that you're not familiar with, and
in that case, I can understand having someone go over it.
Right. I can absolutely understand somebody coming in and being like, hey, yeah, none of this would actually happen. Let me tell you what would, again, as long as their intentions are good and it's not just to be like, all of this is problematic, all of it. No, if you've got somebody that comes, they did this with Moana. Disney did this. They actually had a council, Polynesian
I don't
people
disagree with that.
Originally, Maui, they were going to make him bald, and the council's like, yeah, no, actually in our culture, like, long hair is power. You got to give him long hair. Because they were going to do like, well, it's The Rock. We got to make him bald. So they gave him the long hair. But, little things like that would be caught. I do agree with. Again, it is your intention, but the problem with sensitivity readers is that they are being abused. I think a lot of editors are bringing them in and it's overkill. And I think a lot of sensitivity readers, because they're mired in that Twitter culture, are coming in with the worst intentions, like, everything that's going to potentially offend Twitter, we need to get rid of.
Well, I think they look at you too as a person. Are you diverse? If not, then we're going to take extra steps to find problems.
Right. Because they said it's a case-by-case basis, even publishers. So, I'm going to say it. It could be that, like, well, if we've got a book written by somebody with some ethnic persuasion or background or gender identity, that one we're going to let slide because we're just going to say, hey, they know what they're talking about because it's not me. We got a cis white dude coming in here writing something. It's probably going to have racism in it. So we got to make sure we get the sensitivity reader.
Interesting side note. We were going back through Crimson Ran of the True North before we were sending it to the printer. And I had to reread some of it. And we wrote this a long time ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, like these things the sensitivity readers have a shit fit about. And there are some of the funniest parts. They're left in the book, of course, because, our intention wasn't to be anything terrible. It was just, it's funny. But I know it pissed some of them off because they get offended by everything.
I think a lot of the, this is why so much, YA young adults is so tame and milquetoast, is because you can't offend anybody, especially in publishing. This is why, like, even with publishing deals, very seldom do you get a publishing deal to get your graphic novel published. And this is a side note, but without them wanting to go in and either redo it or wanting them to, have editorial input. And this is exactly, I think, why. I think they do it to make sure they can run it through their filter first versus here's a finished product. You can just print it because they're going to be like, oh, no, we didn't run it through the sensitivity readers.
Well, I still love it when the male agent told me, the female writer, that my character wasn't feminist enough.
I know, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot to be said about this article, and they basically go down. It basically boils down to they're not all bad guys. They're just trying to be culturally.
Well, no, you can't say bad guys. They're goodies or baddies.
They're goodies or baddies.
You can't say heroes or villains or bad guys or good guys or goodies or baddies.
Yeah, so this is really what boils down to. This is Gould. I'm not sure what her first name is here, but she's the sensitive. Helen Gould. Okay, so she doesn't seem like she's a bad person per se, but this is what's very telling, right? Gould suspects that there are two strands when it comes to why publishers employ her. It's a diversity and inclusivity thing on an organizational level. And I'm going to talk about that with Hasbro because this is definitely part. And they're probably like, oh, look, we're doing our part for ESG and DEI because we hired the readers to go through, our Wizards of the Coast stuff, right? But there's also probably a PR aspect too. The last thing you want is to publish a book and then have loads of people on social media saying this is offensive.
I forgot the on there, but yes.
Well, they're too busy with sensitivity readers. They couldn't hire a basic editor.
Or maybe on's offensive in some way.
Yeah, right. Maybe on is offensive. Because what about the people that are off?
Right. You know.
That said, sensitivity reading is still a relatively small industry, a service offered by freelancers and small agencies that publishers use on occasion. Right? Okay. No, I think it's on a lot. I think it's used a lot more. I think it's used a lot more. They're basically like, it's just occasionally we hire sensitivity readers.
Here's the thing too with the Roald Dahl stuff. They had an organization that goes around and their whole point of this whole organization is to go around finding books to edit because, for sensitivity reasons. So like they're out there actively promoting it. We saw that one group, I forget what it was now, we talked about it a couple years ago, and they were out there saying that their job was to do that kind of stuff, and they're out there trying to find fault with things so that people would hire them.
Yeah. Look, again, if your job is to find things that are offensive, you're going to find everything that could potentially, possibly, maybe offend anyone at any point in time. And, and they're basically what they're trying to argue is like sensitivity readers aren't ruining everything. There's not very many of them. And it's like, no. I think even if they're not hiring a sensitivity reader per se, I think a lot of editors now, a lot of younger editors especially, have that Twitter cancel culture mindset. And they're like, this is problematic. If I publish this, what are my friends going to say?
The problem with the word problematic is that goalpost moves constantly.
Yes.
And what was problematic, when they started picking up a book, might be problematic according to Twitter, like right before they published the book. So it's going to be constantly in flux. It's stupid. You just, put it as is. I mean, if something egregious, like super egregious, I can understand. But, and like you said, if you really want to reflect a culture, accurately, I can completely understand that. But there's a limit. And then it becomes ridiculous.
It actually becomes absurd at some point.
Oh, yeah, absurd.
I mean, it really is. I mean, and a lot of people, for them, I think Roald Dahl was a tipping point. It just gets to a point where it was kind of under the radar for a while. People knew that publishing was kind of weird. They knew that D&D was getting weird. They knew that, it's like, why is everybody trying to tiptoe around issues or trying to apologize for every damn thing? And when they went back and they started making the changes to Roald Dahl, they're like, okay, what the hell is actually going on? So basically, when normies start paying attention to the stuff that we've been talking about for years, you've gone too far and you can't hide it anymore. Like for the longest time, I think it was just kind of hidden. It was swept under the rug. And now everybody's like, okay, the Roald Dahl changes are absolutely ridiculous. The Dr. Seuss cancellations were kind of ridiculous. What is actually going on here? And then people start digging into it and they're like, oh, sensitivity readers. Okay, when did this start happening? And it's like, oh, it's been for years. But again, not on the level that has been the last couple of years. So Hasbro, which owns Wizards of the Coast, which does Dungeons and Dragons, they just put a press release out a couple of days ago talking about how they're one of the Ethisphere's 2023 World's Most Ethical Companies for the 12th consecutive years.
Oh, wait. So they have an ethisphere now?
Ethisphere, yeah. Global leader in defining and advancing the standards of ethical business practices, also ESG, also DI, all of that stuff. ESG, yeah, here. The assessment covers key ESG areas, including corporate governance and board accountability, human rights and ethical sourcing, environmental sustainability, and social impact. So basically, and I don't know how the bank implosion, the Silicon Valley bank implosion is going to affect the whole ESG thing, but a lot of their access to venture capital, as I understand it, depends on their ESG score. So if they want to borrow money, because Hasbro's doing great right now. Hasbro's doing real good right now, right? They had to lay off like 15% of their staff, and they're really not doing well.
Oh, wait, back to that for a second. Ironically, Mattel, Spin Master, Jack Pacific not doing well, but Tomy went up.
The Japanese.
What's that tell you?
The Japanese toy company is going up, but all the Western toy companies are going down. But Hasbro prides itself on its ethics and diversity and ESG and all that jazz. So what they do is when they go to beg for money, for venture capital, they're like, well, look, we hired sensitivity readers and we cleaned up Dungeons and Dragons because it was problematic. And we have...
Because Twitter was mad.
Yeah, we have a Transformers show now where they discuss pronoun usage. Look at all this.
Come on. It's called Transformer.
I know, right? But, this is the thing. So they talked about this specifically. WotC talked about last year. And they talked about how they were hiring sensitivity readers to go through Dungeons and Dragons. And that's why they're making these ridiculous changes they're making. That's why they're bending the knee to Twitter all the time, because it's all about this ESG rating.
But what if people who are longtime players or whatever of the game are offended or they feel excluded? Does that count? No, it only goes one way. That's the problem.
Because there's a whole narrative being spun around this, and this is so
That's
weird.
no surprise. There's narrative that goes along with it. You don't say.
There's a whole narrative being
Water's
spun around
wet.
this.
It's a day that ends in what?
It is that the old players, the old D&D players, were basically a bunch of racist white dudes.
Mm-hmm. Because you know, if you're a white person, you're automatically racist.
Yes.
But no other people. That's
absolutely,
not the way.
it's baked into your DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a choice. Oh, like the monsters that don't have a choice whether to be good or bad.
No. Everybody has a choice now.
Yeah. So anyway, they basically
bang my head on the table.
They've been demonizing old players, trying to get away from classic D&D. And again, I think it is about chasing the ESG money, possibly. It's about having that clout. And it's also a cultural thing, because I think a lot of these companies are hiring younger people, recent college grads, who think Twitter is the real world, and they're all kind of like trying to appease. And publishers, especially graphic novel publishers, back to publishing, a lot of the people that are in charge of graphic novel divisions at traditional publishers are like in their 20s. So they're like right out of college, getting a job as an editor, easily manipulated, and they've been like living on Twitter for years, and they think that's the real world.
I would love to see some of these people in like 15 years and talk to them again and be like, okay, where are you now? Now that you've actually lived in the real world, where are you now?
But here they're talking about like every D&D project going forward. A cultural consultant or sensitivity reader joins you during your creative process to ensure your project not only doesn't offend, but also supports and validates the people you're talking about.
Again, if it's a culture but all these are magical cultures,
these are
real.
Fictitious, yes.
But if it's a culture that's a real culture and you don't understand that, I can understand bringing somebody on board to help you with it. And that I would support someone making that choice. The problem becomes when you're basically strong-armed that you must have sensitivity reader and everything, so that there's more and more jobs for sensitivity readers. And do you have to go? What qualifies you as a sensitivity reader? Do you have to like have a special certification for that?
Yes. The more easily offended you are, they go through your Twitter timeline, and they go back about 7 or 8 years.
And you have to have different identifiers too.
Yeah, you got to make sure you've got lots of flags and lots of pronouns in your bio, and you have to make sure that you've been offended by everything for the last 6 or 8 years, and then you can kind of go through the program, and if your peers think you're sufficiently overly sensitive, you can become a sensitive
at that point in time until the goalpost moves again, and then you might be a little bit right of the extreme left, and then you're completely marked as an alt-right Nazi.
Then you're a Nazi.
Then
yes.
your certification is removed.
But you ride that wave as long as you can. Even if you've only got a year as a sensitivity reader, you get offended by as much as you can get offended by. You cash as many checks as you can cash, and then you just go work at Walmart or something.
What about the fact that there's netting here that it showcases holes? And there are a lot of people are very afraid of holes. How can there be any holes allowed? Yeah, that's right. In this game.
This is just
some people are afraid of whales.
Yes, because they're big and they're underwater, and there actually is a fear of deep water.
I know I have that, like the deep water, the big things. Yeah, that's me.
Big things in deep water. Yes.
Yeah. Well, what about that? What if I'm they're not in the water; they're in space, but still.
Oh my God.
What if I'm afraid of that? Are you going to change it for me because I'm one person is scared of something that you don't like?
I didn't get.
Wait, what?
Okay, so. They said that we have sensitivity readers come in. They continue. The studio's new process, this is Wizards of the Coast, mandates every word, illustration, and map must be reviewed by multiple outside cultural consultants prior to publication. While the D&D team is racially, ethnically, gender, and cognitively diverse. Cognitively
diverse now. Oh my God.
What the fuck does that mean?
Remember how I threw my chair the other day? I am this close.
Cognitively diverse.
I am this close to doing it again because this is so stupid it causes me pain.
We don't want our marginalized employees to be burdened with the task of reviewing content for cultural competency. That's why we leverage the expertise of outside cultural consultants. Basically, we don't want Twitter to complain. We don't want Twitter to complain at all because we don't want to lose stamp. We want to make sure that we don't lose.
We don't want our own people to do their damn job and read the book because they might get offended. Well, then maybe you're hiring the wrong kind of people. If doing their damn job and looking over the work that they're supposed to be part of creating causes them to have, to be triggered, then maybe you should find other people. Because I'm sure you can find a lot of people who identify the ways you want to portray, that don't get triggered over every little thing, that can easily do the job. And there are a lot of people out there who want these jobs, but they don't know the right people or whatever to get in. You can find people that are the kind of people you want that'll do the job and do it well. And they won't get so fucking offended by every little thing that they can't even do their job. So what you're saying is they're too offended to do their jobs. We hire other people and pay them more money to do their job for them while we pay them to sit there and not do their job. That's what you're saying.
Yes, we're that progressive that we're going to hire
I
people
wonder
to be
why
offended.
the fuck your stock's dropping off a cliff.
We're going to hire people to be offended on your behalf. It's like, what if
you got Hasbro stock? I'd sell it.
What if you've got like a gay black person that's not offended by stuff, and some white sensitivity reader comes in and be like, hey, why aren't you offended by this? I'm offended for you.
The problem is the sensitivity readers are behind a lot of these outrage mobs on the internet. So they're deliberately causing issues that weren't there or that shouldn't be there just so they can go and keep their damn job. So if their jobs like there might be in jeopardy, then suddenly you're going to hear they're going to find something wrong to have another rallying point.
Yep.
And that's how the goalpost always moves.
Yep.
It's stupid. That's dumb. I hire people. If I hire people to do a job, I expect them to do a job. Not I have to hire outside people to do the job I hired those people to do because they might be too offended and we don't want that.
We can't have that. So anyway, we're gonna wrap this up.
Oh my god.
There it is, guys. The poor sensitivity readers. Are hurt. Their feelings are hurt.
I would most definitely probably have someone look at something if I was trying to represent other culture that I felt, I needed expertise in. But other than that, hell no.
Yeah, fuck it.
Exactly.
Fuck sensitivity
if
readers.
I hire people to do a job, they better do their damn job. I'm not hiring an outside company to come and do the job for them because they're too offended to do the job. Then fucking quit. Go someplace else. This is stupid. No wonder your stock's half of what it was.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, we're going to wrap this up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.